All right, hello everyone. So here's the latest completed 7-day time limit game. So 7 days a move, and it was an interesting one. We'll see what occurred. It turns out to be a draw. Our opponent was rated 1577 at the time on the daily play, so the 7 days per move version of chess. But this is a player who, if you look at their profile, is actually over 2,000 on other skills. So a bit like ourselves, is a newish account that's improving up towards the 2,000 mark. So let's see what occurs. It's quite an interesting game. So we've got black, and we have c4, knight f6, book move, g3, book move, e6. This is all normal stuff. d5, all normal stuff. Knight f3, all book moves, nothing unusual, just developing pieces. Catalan opening from our opponent. So what he's hoping is that I'll play pawn takes pawn, which then activates this bishop. That's the point. So it's a gambited pawn to get activate the bishop. I'm not going to do that anytime soon. I'm just carrying on developing normally. And our opponent plays pawn takes pawn, which goes from a tiny advantage to, I mean, actually it's basically level, but maybe the tiniest, thinnest of advantages for white to the same for black. And that's because after pawn takes pawn, this bishop now is going to end up looking at a pawn chain on the white squares. Oops, sorry, because I'm not on my usual computer at the minute, and the sound quality in the mouse is not quite as good. So apologies if it's not quite as clear as usual. So, okay, so knight to c3, c6, rook e1. So this is all pretty ordinary, boring stuff, just developing moves. And then e4. And the computer's not a big fan of that. It now thinks black stands slightly better. Computer wanted the bishop to come out first to f4. So takes, 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 rook takes, and knight f6. So what have we got? Well, we've got a situation where there's an isolated queen's pawn in the middle of the board. So isolated is telling me that there's no white pawns on the lines next to it. So the game usually revolves around whether white can do anything, perhaps advance it, or perhaps can use these two squares to put pieces on. And in the meantime, black is going to try to swap pieces off, because in an endgame, that pawn, unable to be defended by a fellow pawn, might turn out to be a weakness. So that's what's going to happen here. In theory, of course, in practice, I'm not a grandmaster, and neither is my opponent. So in practice, perhaps it won't quite be great. So the rook has to go back because it was attacked by the knight, so that's fine. Develop the bishop, so that is the best move. Could have put it to f5. Fine, so we're all fully developed, no problem. h3 is okay, asking my bishop what I want to do. And I put it back to e6. So everything, again, I'm looking at controlling this square, stopping this pawn from moving forward, and then hopefully building up an attack on it at some point. So bishop e3, developing move, knight to d5, perfectly good. So we're blockading that pawn. This is the typical plan. Queen to c8, well, I may as well attack that, but of course my opponent's just going to defend the pawn. So I had two pieces attacking, and now my opponent's got two defending, but okay, whatever. And f6 is okay. It wanted me to just play queen to d7, but f6 is okay. F6 is just to stop the knight doing anything, really. And I think at the time I was considering dropping the two bishops back a square and trying to do something with the open file. Rook ae1, it just says as a mistake. Now, I must have missed something here because I don't recall. Oh, do you know, it is a horrible mistake, and how I didn't see this when I actually was playing the game is beyond me. What a terrible move I played next. Of course, this actually allows bishop here, and it just outright wins the exchange. How on earth did I not see this as my next move? I didn't see it. Bishop to b4 is just winning the exchange. What a terrible, terrible mistake. A little example of just chess blindness. I just didn't see it. I wonder if the move's still there. No, so now my opponent spots it and stops me putting the bishop there. Oh, I can't believe I didn't see that. How a dreadful mistake. Anyway, well, one dreadful mistake each. So Bishop d6, okay, fine. Knight goes across, queen to d7. It's all, I mean, I'm okay. I'm still fine. It's no problem. Queen to d3, rook a d8. This is all perfectly okay. Bishop e4, attacking this pawn with the bishop and the queen, not unreasonably. g6 to block it. Bishop h6. So this, at the time, I was starting to wonder if I was getting into some trouble, but the computer analysis says it's still slight advantage black, so clearly not. Okay, queen to d2. f5, interesting. So I risked this, and it turns out that it goes from tiny advantage black to tiny advantage white. So that's actually not a completely sound move. It doesn't say it's awful, but it's not completely sound. But that's a mistake, and I'm pleased about that, because at the time I calculated that my opponent couldn't risk either of the, oh dear, I'm having problems doing arrows, couldn't actually risk this, that it was a mistake. So I was correct about it being a mistake. Queen g5 check. Bishop g6 is best to block the check. And then, sorry, I should put show lines here, shouldn't I? So there we go, so we can see the alternatives. Bishop takes is fine. Queen takes is fine. Queen takes is fine. And then rook takes e2. So apart from this, how on earth have I found all of this good stuff but missed the bishop there earlier on, which should have been obvious to, I mean, a trained chess-playing chimp should have spotted that one. That's, never mind. Anyway, so rook there, queen takes, rook back, and we're -2. So better chances for black than white. Bishop takes is best, queen takes is best. Rook e2 is best. Still slightly better chances for black. King to g1, rook takes b2. Queen g5 is best, king f7 is best. f4 is excellent. Rook b1 is best, and at this point I offered a draw because I wasn't confident that I could actually win the game. I thought the queen was in danger of getting a bit too active, and I couldn't see any way to actually win with bishop to e4, but the computer is saying yes, I can. Let's look at the strongest move. So this is where we've agreed a draw, and I just thought I couldn't see anything better than just shuffling the rook backwards and forwards and just going for perpetual check. But the computer says there's better, so let's follow through the best play according to the computer and see what would have happened. King h2, give the computer a moment or two, and then, yeah, but it's still just repeating the moves, look, isn't it? Ah, no, it wants to play rook f1. Okay, that's interesting. So that prevents this move, because now there's an x-ray going on, so there's actually two pieces stopping this pawn going forward. So I have to say I had not spotted that possibility. What happens? Queen to d8, as you would expect, so the queen is going to threaten check here. And the best move apparently is bishop to e4, so we're starting to surround the enemy king. Queen d7 check. We'll just give it a second to think it through. Yeah, that's fine. And then what am I doing to, because I'm just going to drop pieces here, am I not? So it says knight e7 is the best way to block the check. G4 is the only move it's giving. The other two are just horrid look. So G4 is the only good move, because of the reason being that rook here was checkmate. It was a checkmate threat. So G4 creates an escape square for the king. And then rook takes pawn. Man, okay. Queen takes b7. Presumably, it's going to take the pawn. And this is what the computer is saying the game could have continued like. Rook to f2 check. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this. King g1. It's still saying -1.5, so advantage black, but not, you know, devastatingly so. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What's going on here? Rook g2, it's saying is good. It wanted to change its mind. It thinks rook f3 was probably better. King f1. And so the game would have gone on. Let's see, a couple more moves. Rook here, so you're attacking two pawns at once. I presume the computer wants to play queen takes a7. Yep, absolutely. And oh, bishop d5 rather than rook takes pawn. So I would have thought you just play rook takes pawn, but the computer's saying no, just put the bishop back first. I can't see what difference it makes. Oh, it really, yeah, rook takes 8. There's no big difference, is there? I guess you can't defend this pawn anyway. If you move the pawn forward, then rook takes g4, a4. Oh, king a, no, not a4, king a1. It thinks e1 is the best move, and so on and so. Yeah, I thought a4 looked better, I must admit. Let's just play a4 instead. There we go. And what happens now? Rook takes h3. Presumably a5. No, it's looking at other moves. Yep, there's a5 as being the best move. And how are we going to stop this? Just let it think for a little bit. King e6 it wants to play. Just letting the computer play itself to see if this endgame would have gone anywhere. It's changed its mind. It wants to put the rook behind now, but still -1 to black. Okay, let's no need to go any further on that. So an interesting, oops, what have I done there? An interesting game. Only really two mistakes from me. This move where I played bishop f7, I just can't believe I didn't spot the bishop to here. That's just an unforgivable mistake. Having said that, of course, my opponent made an unforgivable mistake by allowing it, by putting the bishop, the rook onto e1. I can't believe we both didn't spot that. So back, okay, and bishop d6. So fine. And the other mistake wasn't much of a mistake, f5. It's more of an inaccuracy, and we were actually winning. So I provoked my opponent into this because I calculated it didn't work. And the end game is interesting. When you finally get here, the rook and the two pieces against the queen and two pawns. Interesting game. Not unhappy with the result. Perhaps I could have kept going, but I just thought it was really, really risky with the queen getting in down here. So interesting stuff. And a rematch with this player will no doubt begin fairly soon. Right, hope that was interesting. Thank you all for watching. See you again.